If you haven't met me yet, my name's Alex Honea. On our corporate partnerships team here in Frisco, Texas, working on the sports tech side of things. And we've got our service partner here, Zallpy Digital, to talk to you guys about this workshop, why most AI projects fail and how startups can get it right. Tom will be taking lead, and then their team will let it go. But then also want to just encourage everyone who's here. This is interactive. Please feel free to chime in at any point, questions, feedback, anything with like that. We want this to be, not just a sit here and listen to the presentation. We want you guys to be involved. And yeah, just wanted to thank you guys for being here. And I will go ahead and pass it over to the Zalpy team.
All right, thanks, Alex. All right, everyone, thanks for your time, and really appreciate your time here. Today we're going to be, talking about like why most AI projects fail, because as the research says, there's higher percentage of the startups, failing in AI, and we want to talk about what are those common pitfalls and also how to get it right. Right. So just a few intro about Zallpy. Zallpy Digital. We are a consulting and execution of custom software developer solutions. We started around 16 years ago as a startup company. And since then, we have delivered over 800 different custom projects. Some of them are very complex across various industries and domains. And we have built a center of excellence. We use that as a source to support all our future and current projects. And today we sit around 600 plus employees around the globe, and we have our office in Frisco. And I mean, I would say that, you probably would have experience or service somehow, because if you drive BMW, you probably use BMW My App to drive the car. And that app is actually built from the scratch from our team. So you will, if you haven't, will experience our service one day. So today we are joined by our head of AI projects, John, and also a senior principal AI and data engineer, and they will be leading the webinar. And today, what we can be covering is the most common pitfalls in startups, especially in AI, and where AI is actually creating real value in today, right? From our experience, and some of her case studies that are actually delivering business value, and also like a playbook on how you can actually build this, right? To build it right. And so I'm going to head it over to Sean, and he will take it from here.
All right. Thanks, everyone. So we wanted to share with you five common pitfalls we identify on our daily basis with our customers, from startups to big companies. All of them face similar pitfalls. But for the interested of this group, we wanted to focus a little bit more on startups for sure. So the first common pitfall is not having a clear business goal. That might sound a little bit common to smaller organizations, but also happens to big organizations, right? Because companies from time to time, especially now with AI, they don't know exactly what they want to solve using AI. They just want to have an AI idea rather than having a business goal, a problem to solve, right? So this is a very common pitfalls, because when you're trying to achieve something with AI, if you don't have a clear purpose, a clear business goal, you tend to go all over the place and not achieving anything at the end, right? You're building stuff, but it's not solving any problems. And we see that a lot with customers that reach out to us and they say, okay, I'm starting with AI, but we don't know exactly what to do next. In many cases, is because they don't have yet a clear business goal. They just started AI and throwing stuff and ideas to a prompt, expecting to generate value from it, right? The second one is looking for ChatGPT clones, right? This happens a lot with startups that reach out to us, but also even big companies. Some of them are trying to generate their own ChatGPT clone. IT companies are doing the same, with the expectation that we can create something similar, but not quite as ChatGPT or Claude or something like that, we can just add a little bit more of features or customize to look good inside an organization. And although this has a value on its own, saying that we can customize, we can have something custom to our customer, it is a common pitfall because many companies are trying, but the big players they're evolving their solutions so fast. They're creating and releasing features every single week that is hard to compete with, right? And if you are stick with one version you create yourself, many times you won't be able to move on with a solution that can scale and can reach out to customers in potential. Okay. The third one is feeding in reliable data. We see a lot of customers. We have customers that will cover later that had this problem. They had an expectation that somehow feeding the data, it will generate value at the end. It will generate trustful insights. But the thing is that as any other AI, as any other machine learning, if you feed your AI with bad data, you probably will get a wrong or bad output. You might use too much of your limits on AI subscriptions. You can have wrong information being held to your customer throughout your application that uses AI. So it's very important that you're feeding data that you can actually rely on. Even if it's unstructured data, you need to be careful about what you're feeding your AI with. Okay. The fourth one is over reliance on the AI output, right? We see many companies trusting their whole business value into the AI output. And although AI is improving a lot, there's a huge gap between what specialists can, in some cases, evaluate and provide to the customers, rather what the AI can provide directly to the customers. So in some cases, and I'll share also a case later with that, we need to have guardrails. We need to have check systems to make sure that you can, with a high confidence, rely on your AI outputs. So we see a lot of companies trying or use cases going downhills because they're over relying on the AI output. Okay, and finally, fifth. Sorry, Tom, I think you went through all the slides. Okay. So the fifth one is underestimating the engineering complexity. So if there are programmers, guys from engineering here, IT engineering here in the chat in this meeting, obviously understand this very well. And one thing that is good about AI or how it's being implemented today is how many people can have access to technology is very democratic as it is right now, at least while they don't increase too much their subscription rates. Like any founder, any CEO can trade out and do amazing things, right? You can very quickly prompt, I want to create a system to manage my book catalog or whatever. So you can feed that and have a nice dashboard, a nice Power BI like analytics, fancy tabs, and all of it in your application. However, it doesn't mean you have something that can scale, that you can actually trust, and you understand under the hood what is happening, right? So we see every single day we see a new information news coming up about a huge problem related to security that was because of exploitation of code generated by AI that submitted a pull request to GitHub, and that change broke the whole organization. Right? We just recently had a leak from Anthropic about the cloud code, and people are relating this to a problem in the code that has been potentially generated by cloud development itself. So you see that even big companies are failing or having huge problems about leaking security and so on because the usage of AI, right? So like we are all here trying out new technology, and many of us will fail and eventually will come up with mistakes like any developers might have. But all of this is potentialized now by AI. So for us, the common pitfall is that companies are underestimating the engineering complexity. It goes behind and below the AI model and nice outputs that is required to have a production level, a top tier application or solution running for the public. Okay, so moving ahead, I'll invite here Patrick to continue.
All right, everybody can hear me okay? Just, yep, looks like it's good. Okay, perfect. Looking to where AI is creating some real measurable impact in the workforce society today. I want to first talk about, workforce productivity. So when you think of workforce productivity, you're thinking about like automating some repetitive tasks. I have a specific use case that I do day in and day out, and it takes me 2 to 3 hours a day. I want to automate this. I want to, make my work life better. I want to, gain back useful time that I could be, dedicating to another task, but don't really have time normally because you're spending a lot of time doing this other thing. So this is where we talk about, maybe an AI agent. You can think of them as like a digital coworker. It's like having your best friend, your coworker on, next to you all the time, and then just helps you do things without you having to do everything by hand anymore. So for example, these digital coworkers, these AI agents, they can take and handle multi-step tasks. So, for example, some real world examples that I see and have read about, nowadays. For example, if you use a chatbot to service your customers, you have a website and you deliver products, for example, and someone goes to your website and says, my order didn't arrive. Okay, this is where the chatbot would come in and say, okay, so what's your order number? They would provide the order number. And then what this AI agent would do is it would go and it would search like a knowledge base automatically. There would be an orchestrated tasks or multiple tasks that happen in the back end. And then it would come back with some real-time results for the customer, all without, someone actually having to be there and physically talking with the customer, for example. So another use case with these AI agents is they can do specific tasks like generate code, generate summaries, fill out RFPs, give real-time insights on some specific business decisions utilizing your data that you already have. Basically I wouldn't say fully automating, but helping you on your day-to-day and helping automate all of these repetitive tasks. For example, we've got decision intelligence as well. So when you think of decision intelligence, you think of like dashboards and making the right decisions for the business. And so where does AI kind of fit in here? You want to shift from reactive dashboards, for example, to proactive decisions. And what does that mean? So businesses don't need more data. They need better decisions from the data that they already have. And so, in the past, before AI, the decision was like, oh, well, we just need more data to show, we need to pivot in this direction or that direction, but it's not really that anymore. They just need better decisions from the data that they already have. And that's where machine learning can come in and help with these specific decisions. So it's kind of like think about predicting the future, like having your own crystal ball, but not really. It's not really like anything with a crystal ball. It's just using the facts that you already have, which is already within your data. Some of these examples would be like retail or e-commerce. They have demand forecasting, and so if they have this demand forecasting pipeline built, then they can come out with better inventory planning, for example, preventing stockouts or overstock on specific items. Financing companies, they can do some risk scoring for loans or fraud detection. This is where it becomes very, very useful, especially like with fraud detection and in the security space, because whenever you have, and it kind of pivots back to where we said, feeding in data that is useful, right? This data that then can be this data can be taken and then used, to make these proactive decisions, to help the business, not lose money, for example, in the finance space. And then the other part that we'll talk about is the AI powered process automation. So this is where companies, they want to see some immediate return of investment. What'll happen is they'll combine AI plus workflow automation, and then they'll combine that with their existing systems. So the focus is on eliminating the manual repetitive processes here. Some examples of this would be like, for example, a finance and accounting firm. They have invoice processing. So back before AI, they would have to read, they would have to validate, and then they would have to manually enter in these invoices into their system. So, if we were to automate that process, it reduces the manual entry by 70% to 95%, depending on the process, right? There is no such thing yet as 100% automated, but who knows in the near future. Another good example would be HR and onboarding for any company. HR is an onboarding for new employees has always been a very manual process. There's been document collections. You have to wait for the employee to provide documents. You have to scan the documents. You have to file the documents. What would happen here is, there would be a lot of automation for this document. So the employee delivers the documents, whether through a site or an email, the orchestration kicks off, and then the documents are placed in, scanned, everything done automatically, and then it frees up the HR analyst to do other important tasks. Go ahead and to the next slide. I think we're going to transition back to you, Jean.
Yeah. Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, one of the cases you just remembered me about is one that we just started off with, huge company in Texas, and they were facing exactly that. They need to automate all their procurement process. They have like ClickSign and other systems. It's manual input data right now, and now they want to create a automated, almost 100%, as you said, a platform that they could just easy load into their back office. So they're investing on that, using AI to create the platform, using AI for decision making and supporting their employees, right? But the use case that I wanted, and we selected two here to make it a little more real for you guys. The first one is Flavor Hawk, which is a customer of ours, a startup in California. They're focused on food personalization, suggestion to people in general. They use real-time data to predict the consumer preference. And for that, they need to rely on a bunch of data, not just users' data, real time. They need to have allergy tables. They need to have food menus from restaurants across the US. They had to do that in cross-check with ingredients lists that could potentially be in every single dish into their menu. So they had a great idea. They had a problem they knew they wanted to solve. So they didn't go into a pitfall of not having something. They wanted to sort it out. They had that. but they were relying on data that was just not good, right? They were fed with third-party data, and their whole business were based on that. So when we were asked to help them, they were just starting off. They had the idea. They had a first version of a draft or the AI model they wanted to put in place. We had to go a step back and help them on the data foundation, because they could not unify and have a reliable automated pipelines checking the data, not just the real-time data, but even the historical data was not yet at the point they could rely. So their whole business depended on have a good accuracy on prediction to the user. Otherwise, the application would start suggesting dishes and ingredients they could not for sure consume or they had no interest in. So we supported them creating the whole pipeline, their whole foundation for the governance. So this goes in line with we saw earlier about companies underestimating the complexity because there was a lot that still needed to happen. And also they were confident about the data, but they didn't check their input data. So their output was not just trustworthy. But fortunately, we could work with them on that. And now they have a huge accuracy, more than sufficient for their business case. And also they could fast their time to market using AI to speed up the development of their application, right? The second use case is a huge company on the automotive market. We cannot share exactly who is the customer, but you can figure it out. But the interesting here, though, is a big company. Their problem is both simple in terms of the objective, but also very important, very common to happen on big companies, which is have access to trusted data to have decisions being made quickly, as Patrick was talking just before. So what they had was a bunch of documents, huge companies, historical documents, Excel sheets. We have PDFs scanned, all sorts of unstructured and structured data, but they needed to make sure they could rely on that information to have decisions being made by executives pretty quickly. So one could simply go ahead and say, okay, let's feed that to LLM and we'll provide all the information we need, or use strategies like RAG, which we did. But also we had to create a whole context awareness retrieval for the image to make sure the data was being correctly interpreted. And we had to create an ecosystem of multiple agents to cross-check the response and the results to make sure that you could rely on the data and the information that has been provided. And we can do this as an analogy for how planes actually work nowadays, right? So the computer that takes action within an airplane is not just, okay, the computer goes and tells you exactly the calculations and boom, it does exactly what it has calculated. They have multiple computers doing the same calculations to make sure that at least two of them agree on the solution or the numbers calculated. So very similarly, when we are talking about very complex and critical information, we need to make sure the AI, which can hallucinate a lot, It can generate and forecast things based on a whole history. We cannot forget is a probabilistic machine learning at the end, right? Is an AI that is calculating the likability of the next word to be there. So this is a technique we have to put in place, and we bring this up because also for you in situations where you need to rely more on your outputs, this is a technique that can help you out to actually put multi-agents there checking using different LLMs to make sure you're reaching out the same results. And that's what we did in this case. We worked through from end to end with the customer. We understood the problem they wanted to solve. We saw the problems that came with that, right? The risks, and we finally came to a very satisfying outcome for that solution. Okay, so now we go to how to actually build something, and Patrick will guide us through to some aspects to have in mind when working on AI projects.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go through this a little quicker, but that way we can leave some room for questions in the end. So starting with this, what's behind AI? You know, how do I build an AI pipeline? First and foremost, as we keep talking data, I'm sure we've said data a million times here, but it's the truth. It's really the foundation. Your data layer is always going to be the foundation when starting with when building an AI pipeline. So in data, everything starts with the accessible and reliable data. So we talked about fragmented data. We talked about data sources that are underutilized. The problem isn't about the amount of data a company has. I mean, it could be 50 terabytes of fragmented or underutilized data, but if you feed that data into any type of LLM, for example, your results that you receive back are not going to be reliable, for example. So some real world examples of data sources, ERP systems, CRMs, and obviously operational databases. So these could be centralized into data lakes, into data warehouses. But yeah, so anything that when starting any pipeline for AI, data is going to be the first step. The AI layer is basically the intelligence. So you think of AI, it's mainly the brains after the data hits it, right? So this is where AI actually looks at the data that's fed to it. It'll analyze, predict, and then it'll generate responses based off that data. You could think about this as like machine learning models, LLMs or generative AI models, the chatbots as well, AI agents in this case. This layer, the AI layer powers, the predictions that happen. So if you're feeding data and you want to know what's the sales forecast for tomorrow, the data goes into the AI reads the data, and then it makes the prediction based off the facts. The application layer, this is where you could say this has the real business impact. So this is where users actually experience, the value of these two. So the data layer, the AI, and then the application. The application is where the users actually see the data or actually see the responses. So some real world examples of this would be like customer support tools, internal dashboards, like mobile or web applications, automation workflows that are triggered inside business systems. And, well, I guess what you could say with this is if AI isn't integrated into how people work, then it really doesn't drive impact. So around that, the encompassing effect around all of this is governance and security. So what do I mean by that? And so it's the one thing that we can't ignore. None of this works at scale without governance and security sitting across everything. And why do I say that? This ensures the AI is secure. It ensures that it's compliant and reliable and explainable. So without it, the AI is just like a permanent pilot. So it's like always stuck in pilot mode if it's not governed or has any security. So what does it cover? Data governance, for example, who can access what? The data quality and lineage, for example. The security is protecting sensitive data, preventing leaks through AI systems. So like we mentioned some leaks with not leaks, but some bad code that was pushed and then through GitHub, and then things break. Or I've seen this before as well, that AI would leak some environment secrets, which is not good. You don't want your API keys, out in the middle of the internet. When we talk about governance, the governance will actually it'll actually monitor the model, the AI model that's being used. It'll also monitor for bias. So I'm not sure that, we won't get too deep into, AI bias, but basically it falls back to the data that you feed into the AI determines what type of data is going to come out of the AI. So, some real world examples of governance, I would say, restricting AI from accessing sensitive financial or HR data. Like if it doesn't need to access social security numbers, why would you feed it social security numbers? That kind of thing. That's where governance and security kind of makes the entire thing come together. So without it, it's very I would say dangerous if there's no governance or security that are encompassing the entire application, the AI application. So basically, in a simple one-liner, you could say that governance is what turns AI from this experiment that you're just playing with into something that the business can actually trust and feel secure whenever feeding data and getting these results. All right.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank
So I think, we have come to an end. I believe we have about a few minutes left in the session. So yeah, we're open to, receive any questions so our team can actually answer. So please let us know if you have any questions.